All right, I've got 9:01, so we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. As a couple of you figured it out already, there is the ability to do some chat, and I left chat open. You can send me a private message if you like to, but I find this actually has been working really well during our last sessions. So if you do have a question, pop it up, and I'll keep an eye on the dialog box and then answer it pretty much real time. If I know that that topic or that question will be covered in an upcoming section, then I'll make sure that I'll tell you that, an example, hey, Gregory, we're going to cover that later on this afternoon. We'll steer you through and that'll keep us on track. In terms of the agenda for today, starting at 9 o'clock, like we just did, we're going to run through and take a break just after 10 o'clock, 10:15, something around that time. And then we'll take a break for lunch around 11:30 and then restart back up at noon. The schedule is to wrap up for 3 o'clock today. And so far, we've been running ahead of schedule a little bit, so I don't plan on keeping you here later. But my time is yours. So if at the end of the course there is any other open items, questions, topics you haven't seen covered, I'm here for you. And then following that, we do have I'll call it included with the offering now, support. So if you've got questions about filling out the application, questions, would this location be approved and so on, we'd be more than pleased to help you out with that. And I've got down there to text, call, or email. We'll definitely get back to you and provide you that ongoing support. As instructors, we like nothing more than to see you finish the course, hear back that you went and wrote the test, passed, got your license, sold your first car. It's really kind of cool to see all that happening because there's many entrepreneurs that we've seen getting kicked off in this business. So really good. I mentioned about questions going all the way through. Please do let me know. The other thing I do ask as a courtesy is if you can't hear me or for some moment you can't see the screen, let me know because otherwise I won't have any feedback on that. And then also in terms of pace or topics, if I'm not covering it well, feel free to say, hey, back up a little bit, slow down, something like that. I'd be more than pleased to help you out with that. All of you should have received now the link, and that is for a download copy of the study guide. That study guide will pretty much exactly mirror what you're going to see on the screen today, just a different layout, of course, landscape or portrait if it's printed or not. Questions so far? We're all good. Let's talk about the topics of what we're here. We purposely laid out this course in a flow that goes from, where you're starting today all the way through to when you've got your license and, ideally how we're going to keep you out of trouble. So let's look at the first part. We're going to talk about this in a few moments. When is a dealer license required? What are the license requirements? If I do want a wholesale or a retail, we'll talk about those two different types in a moment. How do I renew my license? How can I open up an additional branch? How do I use these things called dealer plates, or as a DMV refers to them, special plates? Then we'll roll into the requirements for vehicles. So if you sold to the consumer, what safety equipment has to be working, what type of inspections would you have to do potentially, and then we'll talk about smog certificates, odometers. And the last bullet, if you want to do your own repairs on cars you purchase from auctions, what are the rules around that? Then we'll get into, once you've done those, the vehicle part, you bought them, now we got to go sell them. So we'll talk about advertising. What are the rules? What's this thing called certified used cars? What type of disclosures do you have to share with the consumer when you sell someone a car with, let's say, frame damage? What do you have to tell them about that? And then truth in lending. So if you're involved with any type of financing, what are the rules around financial disclosures, interest rates, credit scores, and so on? Then we'll talk about this thing called a lemon law. So if you see a car that is, branded as being a lemon law car, what are the rules around that for you as a dealer that, you would have to disclose that to a consumer? And really, how does a car become a lemon law car in the first place? And how does that affect used car dealers? So now that you advertise vehicles, and it's time now to do the contracts and disclosures. So we'll talk about that, buyer's guide, these service contracts. We used to call them extended warranties. How do you collect DMV fees? How do you collect sales tax? What are the rules around that? How do I get my permit to be able to collect sales tax? Then we'll talk about the contracts and then also the contract cancellation option agreement. So if someone did want to return a car back to you as a dealer, what are the rules around you accepting that back, or do you have to accept it back? And then we'll move into the DMV transfer so that now that you have sold your first car, wholesale or retail, how do I get that out of the previous owner's name into my buyer's name? Again, be that a dealer or a private individual. And what are the time requirements for that? How soon do I have to do it? How could I get into trouble and maybe have penalties if I don't do it quick enough? And the fourth bullet down there is stolen vehicles and what we call indicia or serial numbers. How can we identify stolen vehicles and make sure we don't buy one or, of course, accidentally sell one afterwards? And then we'll talk finally about the unlawful activities. How can you get into trouble as a dealer and then potentially lose your license? So it'll be fairly quick paced. If you guys don't ask questions, we'll probably skip over topics that you want to see covered. So feel free to ask away. It makes it very much more interactive. And again, whatever question you post, the group can see. And very often we see that the person who asked the question, it was on the minds of half a dozen other people on there. So we'll get running. So this one course, one certificate, if you are going for a wholesale license or a retail license, or if you want to learn more about this broker thing, that the broker endorsement, as we call it, we'll talk about that as well. And I do like the fact that DMV does one course, one certificate, one test, because if you started off as a retail dealer and then decided you wanted to become wholesale, or you started wholesale and then wanted to become retail, you don't have to go out and get a new license. You don't have to go out and take the course again or test again. You can simply fill in a form to change that license type. So furthering that, kind of by way of introduction, I've been a dealer myself for pretty much 20 years in California, longtime car guy. I started off my business wholesale, and we'll talk about the differences there in a moment. But I decided I was more interested in doing retail as well, selling friends, family, online, and so on, and moved that license type. So we're pretty well versed. I will use my example, as a license, and certainly how I've got the family involved in corporation and so on, and hopefully every time only when it's relevant. So here's the two different license types up here, and we talked them about being a retail, or as they refer to it as being wholesale only. And the common questions that come up is, with either of those license types, can I buy and sell at auctions? And you can. And can you buy vehicles tax and DMV fee free? Yes, you can, provided those vehicles are for resale. So if I go to the auction, I'm wholesale or retail, I buy a car and I'll use this fictitious $10,000 car. I take it back to my lot. I don't pay any DMV fees, don't pay any sales tax, provided that vehicle is for resale. I'm going to be selling it. If I'm going to use it for my own business, I got to pay tax on it. But real typical, you're buying a car for selling it later on, no tax, no DMV fees. Can you sell to anyone outside of California with either license? And we'll talk a little bit more about where that sale takes place later on today. But really, the DMV doesn't allow you as a wholesale dealer to sell to a consumer within California. But as a wholesale dealer, you are allowed to export either out of state or out of country, provided that consumer doesn't come in to see you. And again, we'll drill down a little bit more. And then can I use dealer plates? If I'm a wholesale or retail dealer, can I get these things called dealer plates, put them on a vehicle that I bought, and then drive around? And the answer is yes. Where the big difference comes up is on these last three. So can I sell to the public in California unless you're a retail license? Absolutely not. And that's something that would be impossible to even transfer the titles unless you are a retail dealer. But the good news is you need a commercial office. Retail dealer does, and we'll talk about the requirements of that, whereas a wholesale dealer does not. They can work from their home. And then also in that vein, do I need a car lot or a display area? A retail dealer does, and a wholesale dealer does not. So a lot easier to get wholesale. Many people do start off that way, but then once they get a taste of it and want to start selling again cars to friends, neighbors, relatives, or advertise, it does require to get a retail license.